to share this. Thank you. Um, Let me start a watch party. Add one video, and we're gonna start the party. All right. Thank you, Keno. Thanks, Keno. Thank you. Um, Start a watch party. Add one video. Start the party. All right. Thank you, Keno. Thanks, Keno. Thank you. Because I want to read the comments live on that, so I'm going to end this. I'm going to edit this. So, a pleasant good evening, Mr. Antoine Craigwell, and to everybody out there who's tuned in. It is now 7:33, and I just want to thank you personally for tuning in. Everyone who is there now, and everybody who's going to see this at some point.
A bit blurry though.
So, a pleasant good evening, Mr. Antoine Craigwell, and to everybody out there who's tuned in. It is now 7:33. Hi, Chad. Welcome. Thank you personally for tuning in. Everyone who is there now, and who's going to see this at some point. Yeah, I think we should just continue.
Yeah.
And thank you, for choosing Hi, Chad. Welcome. To be on here, to put a face to what is it, that you do, and what is it that what is it that what your calling is. So before we go into the whole discussion of the post, I would like you to introduce yourself to the people so they would know who you are, what is it that you do, where you come from, and all that fun stuff. So
All
I'll
right.
give it
So
to you.
thank you very much again, Vaughn, for coordinating this discussion. So as Vaughn introduced, my name is Antoine Craigwell, and I'm originally from Guyana. I've been in the United States now for close on 30 years, so just about a lot of my life. But a lot of my work is around mental health, raising mental health awareness so as to prevent black gay men from killing themselves. And part of that work, I started an organization, but before that I did a documentary called You Are Not Alone, in which for the first time black gay men were breaking the silence about talking about their experience with depression and suicidal ideation. And so the issue is that after we finished the film, we started an organization called DBGM. DBGM's board decided that one of the best things we can do to expand the work of the organization is to expand and create a conference that focuses on LGBTQ people of color anywhere in the world. And this past year in 2019, we just completed 5 years of the In My Mind conference. As you can see, I'm wearing a t-shirt that says the In My Mind logo. And on the back behind me, last year, the New York City mayor gave us a proclamation recognizing recognizing the conference and declaring October 10th In My Mind Day. So there's a whole lot, and then, I just want to throw this back to you, Vaughn, and ask, why is it you decided you wanted to do this, have this conversation today?
So a lot of I mean, for a number of reasons, but one of a lot of people who some people who know me personally, they know that it is something that I suffer with, myself, my family, because my dad was a victim of suicide, and sometime in the summer last year, there was a young man around my very age range who committed suicide while I was in St. Lucia. So it is very close to home. It is very close to a community that I love and care about. It is very close to where I am, where I'm from, and it is something that is not spoken of a lot, in our culture. And this past weekend, we had this event last Saturday. Was it last Sunday?
Last Saturday.
It was the rainy day. The rainy
it
day.
was last Saturday.
Saturday.
Yeah.
Yeah,
In
that was on
Queens.
Saturday, and it just resonated the fact that with the study that was being done, the results of the study that came out of, and how I could so connect to so much of what was discovered there, and I think that it would be a duplicate of how the situation is in St. Lucia. So I say that to say on Monday or Tuesday, when I woke up, and you know I just felt like I just wanted to know what people thought, try to wrap my head around, you know just the different perspectives. Cindy says adjust the camera. Are you seeing me? Are you able to see us?
Just keep going.
Sounds good. Chad says sounds good. Okay. Thank you, Chad. Yeah, I woke up, and I've just been thinking about everything that happened on the weekend, and stuff that you see on social media. Like every now and again, you see a post about, some domestic violence situation, somebody, who is just frustrated, and it is like sometimes you see posts on Facebook, and the amount of reactions that you would get for something negative would just outweigh the positive. Like you put positive stuff out there and nobody reacts to it. Like nobody likes it, nobody shares it. And then you see a plethora of negativity and reasons why people, different reasons why people are just angry. People are depressed and people have all sorts of other emotions going on. So I was just drawn, I was just moved, I guess, to just use that and partner it with what happened on the weekend at that event, and to a get some information, just get some thought, get some thought patterns with what people believe are the reasons for people who commit suicide.
All right. So a couple of things in what you were saying there that I think are important that we should talk about and address. First off, I think your viewers and your listeners need to understand and to know that I am not a mental health professional, and that nothing that I'm going to say here tonight is a diagnosis, or am I prescribing anything, because I'm not qualified to do that. My work is about raising awareness to have these kind of conversations, because this is what our conference is also about, is that very often the issues about surrounding mental health are always within the confines and the privacy of a clinician's room, their therapy room, but it doesn't always come out, and we don't know what's being discussed, and I know that a lot of stuff has to be kept private for confidentiality reasons, but some of the stories that are shared and some of the stories that people talk about are stories that we all need to be aware of and we need to know. And some of the stories we keep quiet, we keep hidden.
Yeah.
And we carry these stories and we pass these stories on from generation to generation. And so it's time we begin to tell our story, to break the silence. And part of raising awareness about mental health is so that so that people don't feel ashamed to tell their story. That somebody, through telling their story, will know that I'm not alone, but more importantly, that they have the strength to tell their story. Because it is very often in our societies, and I think this has come, the whole issue about mental health has come because of the Catholic Church. Okay, because if you go back and you look at many centuries ago, there was no understanding about mental health, and anybody who displayed any health issues, any mental health issues that were not understood by the church, were deemed as demonic. And so there's all these rites of exorcism and all sorts of stuff. And so a number of people were killed because the church and religious leaders did not understand what mental health was about. But now we have that knowledge, now we have that information about what mental health is about. And we can encourage people to go get therapy, to go get treatment. What we also need to understand is that when we're talking about mental health, is that the construct about mental health only came about within the middle of the 18th century, 19th century, in the 1800s. And then Sigmund Freud and a couple of other people came up and started codifying it and putting it together in the early 20th century. But since we're talking about people of color, let's go back and look at how was mental health addressed and dealt with in ancient cultures. How was mental health dealt with in African villages, in traditional African villages? And that is some discussion and some research that is sorely needed, that is not there, because we've all been caught up in the Western European Freudian psychoanalytical paradigm that tells us this is what mental health is about. And a friend of mine just died back in December, and he was one of the first black gay men who had written a paper about depression and black gay men when he was at the University of North Carolina in Greensboro. And he was at University of at Amherst in Massachusetts when he died. And he suggests that there is no really accurate way that we currently examine and talk about mental health in black and people of color communities. Because mental health in black and people of color communities looks different than it does in white communities. Okay? So sometimes that is why sometimes we hear the stereotypical, the angry black man or the angry black woman, or you're rude, or you're confrontational, or you're about conflict and you're aggressive and you're arrogant. Not really quite understanding that someone who's dealing with mental health issues may represent and present their mental health, and it may appear as if there's arrogant or lots of anger, and there really is no satisfactory way to address it.
But how do our people even realize that they have a mental issue?
And that means that they need to start seeing mental health professionals and mental health professionals who are people of color, who are able to take their Western European Freudian psychoanalytical construct and apply that and mix that with their cultural ethnic backgrounds.
But listen to me. Okay, I live in a house, okay, with West Indian parents. Okay, I'm just I'm just going through this scenario together, okay? And I come home from school and I say I'm tired, I'm stressed, or I'm depressed. Okay? My mother will give me 2 slaps and ask me what is it that I do have no bills to pay, I should not be stressed, why am I depressed? Okay?
So that again goes back to the whole construct about understanding what mental health is. If I come home and I say I am depressed, and my mother does not understand what depressed means, because we have to understand that look at how depressed is then viewed. Depressed is viewed from the perspective of somebody who's saying they're depressed is that they're lazy, they're weak, they don't want to do anything. Okay? So your mother is going to slap you and tell you what you got to be depressed about. Okay? Without even trying to first of all understand, well, what is going on in your life? Now, a progressive or a more open-minded mother will ask the question, what do you mean you're depressed? What's going on? How do you feel? Why do you feel this way? What is it that caused you to feel that way? And we can say, just shifting a little bit, that the same thing applies to somebody who's who's gay or lesbian or bisexual, transgender in their community, in their family. Because research now tells us that if at least one parent accepts that child for who that child is, then that child is likely to grow up a much better and well-adjusted child and member of the community. And I think arguably the same thing applies with when we talk about mental health. Because if your mother, if you come home from school one day, or you come home from work and you go straight to your room and you don't come out, okay? And she's calling you, you're not answering, and you ain't coming down to eat, okay? And she ain't here in the bathroom, nothing. So you're not even, she's not hearing any movement. But she knows that you're in there and you may be playing music and tuning everybody out. Okay? So she may not understand or know what is going on. Okay? If she was somebody who understood what mental health is, who understood what was going on, come and knock on the door and said, are you all right? Is there anything I can help you with? Is there anything that you want to talk to me about? Okay? And I might shout out, no, go away and leave me alone.
Well, you know, I mean, a lot of the people that we know, okay, a lot of the people that we know in the places where we come from, in the Caribbean especially, okay, and growing up in a West Indian household, you know how much you can say and what you can say, I think, and how measured that is, and how one expresses themselves. So I say that to say, how do you contextualize that, well, for the West Indian household?
Well, it's the same conversation that it's the same thing I just said, is that because culturally, because of religious belief, that we've been told and we've been taught that anybody who is not seemingly a functional, active, productive, contributing member of society,
not necessarily,
that person is not well. Okay? Because we've had the church, that's why the church has the rite of exorcism, and that has come down through the ages. Let's go back and talk about
speaking of that church situation. You know, it's one of the reasons why, you know, I had such a hatred in my heart, you know, for the Catholic Church. Even now I do, you know. A few days before my father committed suicide.
Hang on. One of the things we want to do is also change the language. Okay. So we don't say commit. We say take one's life or kill yourself. Okay. Because one doesn't commit to doing something as final, as terminal as that. One completes it. One is not successful at suicide either. One completes suicide. Okay. So it's a matter also of beginning to change the language about how we express and discuss suicide. That event that I spoke at last Saturday, one of the things about that event is that it focused on suicide, but suicide is the end result. It's what happens before the suicide happens, and it is how the community and the family responds when a suicide happens. So you were saying.
So what I learned, and after the fact, and that is after I actually learned that at the funeral. Okay, at my father's funeral, I was like 12, and oh, I have to send this to him. Just 1 second. He was one of the people that I need to pay attention to his comment. Here.
Just continue.
I learned at the funeral that a few days prior, you know, to the whole event, he had gone to the presbytery that's in our community, you know, that he had gone to see the priest there, and he went to the office, and the priest said that a man came to his office a few days ago, and the man just came and sat there. He asked the man what his problem was, and the man did not talk to him. The man just he just sat quiet. So the priest said to the congregation, okay, that he said to my father, if you cannot tell me what your problem is, I cannot help you.
Okay. Yes.
That is what the priest said, that he said to my father. He said to my father, if you cannot tell me what your problem is, I cannot help you. Um, so I would like for you to give me how you would process that, just how you
Well,
would,
there are a couple of
how
things.
you would
There are a
see
couple of
that.
things in that, and the first thing that I want to suggest is that if you yourself are seeing a therapist, that this is a conversation you also need to have with the therapist, because it's clearly that it is something that still troubles you,
It
that
does,
still
yes.
bothers you, that it still is very painful and traumatic for you. And you may need to talk to the therapist about that to begin to work through understanding that. But what I can suggest is, and we also see this not just in the Catholic Church, but we see this in other religious beliefs, where religious leaders assume a certain responsibility and they put it under the term of spirituality or spiritualism or religion, where they provide counseling or guidance or direction under the spiritual or a religious construct, when in fact many religious leaders do not have the common honesty to say to someone who says, I have a problem, I need to talk to someone, to say to that person, I am not qualified as a mental health professional. Can I help you to connect you with somebody who will be able to provide that information or to be able to assist you? But very many religious leaders, and we see this a lot in evangelical churches, and we see this as well in also some Catholic churches and Anglican churches, where the priests are not mental health professionals. Now, there are some religious leaders in both evangelical and Christian who are, as part of their training, have become mental health professionals, and they are able to provide mental health counseling up to a point, because you also have to remember that they are walking in two worlds.
Yeah.
They're walking in mental health world and they're walking in the religious world. But an honest honest religious leader will say to the person asking for help, this is only how much I can help you. Can I help you to connect you with someone who is a professional who will help you more than I can? One of the problems that we've had with religious leaders who assume a quasi-mental health role is that there is no confidentiality, there is no assumption of confidentiality. And so the person is likely to sit down with that religious leader and pour out their whole life story. And the next thing you know,
The whole church.
the first lady, the church mother,
Pastor
and
wife,
everybody in the
the whole
church.
congregation knowing. It
No.
did not take time for them to know my story.
But you understand what I'm
That's
saying?
another story. Yeah,
So,
I know how that
so
goes.
there are a couple of different things in what you're in, and particularly in the story about your father's experience and him taking his life, is that yes, the priest should have recognized that your father was representing mental distress. He was in crisis and he needed immediate action. He needed immediate intervention. And if the priest was properly trained or had some inkling about mental health, the priest could have sat with him very quietly and said, how can I help you? What can I do for you? And the priest's reaction, in a sense, he cannot be blamed, because this is what he was not trained in mental health.
Right.
And the
I did
Catholic
not blame
Church,
him, and I want to make that abundantly clear. I am not blaming him. I just felt at the time, at my age, at the time of that, I felt that something could have been done.
yes,
Definitely some things could have been done, to prevent, the outcome, and it made me very angry.
and
to
so,
know
for
that.
example, I know someone who is an Anglican priest who went on ahead, as well as doing his studies for the Anglican priesthood, and became a psychologist with a PhD. He now ministers at a church in Alabama. Okay, Father Tommy Watkins. Okay, he is an Anglican priest, but he's also gone ahead and done the work to become a psychologist. So he's able to include mental health in his religious service, but also I think he's also, as a black mental health professional, he's able to incorporate what it means to be black. And so when we talk about the Caribbean, when we talk about Guyana, there is a dearth, an absence, a lacking of mental health professionals throughout the entire Caribbean. And even if there are mental health professionals, they are all still very steeped in the Western European Freudian construct. And the challenge for them is, how do I incorporate being a mental health professional with my Western training and my cultural background, what it means to be black, so that I can represent to a black man or a black woman, and I can recognize their signs and their symptoms and say, you know what, this may be what is going on. Can I help you? Can I recommend this? Would you like to do this? At our In My Mind conference last year, we decided to introduce a specific form of activity. We decided to introduce drumming therapy.
Drumming. Because
drumming is used for messaging, it's used to communicate for war, it's also used for celebration, it's used for ritual and prayer, but it's also used for healing. And it's about the sound and the sound vibrations going through a person's body. And so at the last mental health conference, we had a whole session that they were African drummers and an Indian Tassa drummer from India, who came and played their drums and explained the importance of drumming in ancient cultures and ancient societies. And so I'm suggesting to you that in ancient cultures, there were ways of dealing with and helping someone who has been dealing with mental health. Let us never forget for 1 minute that mental health has existed as long as humans have been on the earth.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay? Just as similarly, same-sex relationships have existed since humans have existed. Okay? And just a little bit of a note is that we seem to have this construct that same-sex relationships in humanity is alien, is foreign. But consider that if there are at least 1,732 animal species that practice same-sex relationships, and humans are members of the animal kingdom, then what makes us think that we are exempt from that? Okay? Yeah. So a part of human sexuality is we are part of an animal kingdom where sexuality is fluid, sexuality is along a spectrum, sexuality is not confined to male and female. Sexuality is not binary. And unfortunately, religious Christianity, for example, has a lot of responsibility to bear for the binarization.
That's a whole other topic. But
they have allowed and created. But it is important to discuss this because understanding sexuality and understanding sexual orientation is an aspect to who we are as humans. And if it is consistently denied, if a person's sexuality or sexual orientation is consistently denied, then that person ceases to be who they are.
Yeah, it becomes, there becomes a domino effect, because a lot of the reasons, that people mentioned, some people mentioned, for example, Chad said reasons being loneliness, lack of support, lack of friends, lack of family, leading to depression, and all of those things are results of a sub issue. Okay, so when you have all of those problems arising outside of by your family, lack of family leading to depression, lack of friends, loneliness, sticking to yourself, and not seeing any way out. As the yeah, he's on. Mohammed, thanks for tuning in. And I also have Islam on here as well. Islam, and I would love for him to chime in. He had he had a really good comment. Let's go back here.
Anyway,
Go ahead.
but the other thing that I think is also that we also need to have a conversation about is to understand that when we're talking about mental health in people of color communities, it does not always show up as the way that the textbook says it does. Okay? Because you got to remember, and it's similar to how HIV treatments were designed. HIV treatments were not designed for black people. It was bioengineered for white people. Black people were never taken into consideration for HIV medication design. Okay, that is why HIV medication has a different reaction in black people. Okay, and similarly for mental health constructs were never really designed for black people in mind.
That's a study.
Okay, there is research that tells us that the mental health representations and manifestations in black and people of color is different than it is in white people. So, for example, there was an article that was published late last year that talked about understanding schizophrenia in different cultures. Okay? And the researchers asked the question. They asked an American, they asked a Ghanaian, and they asked an Indian, how do they understand, or how does schizophrenia manifest in them? And they're talking about hearing voices, right? What is called auditory hallucinations. They asked the American, and the American said that the voices are troubling, are disturbing. When they asked the Ghanaian said the voices are the voices of God. But when they asked the Indian said that the voices sound like playful, like romantic, like loving. Okay? And what they discovered is that in each particular culture, schizophrenia or auditory hallucinations are manifested differently. So therefore, in black and people of color communities, understanding mental health is represented in a different way. So, for example, many black African Americans from Africa or Afro-Caribbean who are in the United States and have mental health issues, they go to see a therapist, or let's say they go to the emergency room, to the psych emergency, and they check themselves in. Okay? The first diagnosis they're going to get is that they got bipolar and they're given medication. Okay? When in fact, they may not be bipolar. There have been many stories of black men and black gay men and black women who have been diagnosed with bipolar and have been treated with bipolar.
Yeah, they give me the Zoloft, but I don't take it. They prescribe it.
Okay?
Sorry.
But they don't, and they prescribe these medication, and these people are on this medication for years until at some point they go to get a second opinion, and the therapist says to them, but you don't have bipolar. You may have major depression. You may have some other type of disorder, but you don't have bipolar. Okay? The other thing is that for black people, putting them on psychiatric medication has some severe side effects, which includes affecting their libido. And you tell a black man he's not going to get an erection, that is the end of his life.
Okay.
Or you tell a woman she's not going to be feeling horny or anything like that for a while, and the medication is causing it, she's going to get upset. Okay? Because we are a very sexual people. Not just black people, but all humans. And particularly black people, especially we got some sun and color in us.
Melanin, the melanin.
Okay? So I'm just saying.
Yeah, it's so much that we could talk about, and so many directions this whole discussion could go. And I know, you're a wealth of knowledge, you're a wealth of information, and I am very privileged to be able to call you friend and to be able to come up here, to come to your house, and to be able to, to have your Friday night. You could be anywhere else doing many other things, but you're sharing that with me. One of the comments that came in, from my dear friend and my ex-classmate Islam. Islam is Muslim, okay, and he made a comment. His comment says, "I'm really surprised that no one mentioned lack of faith, belief, spirituality, and I hope everyone that reads this comment is open-minded. But while all these reasons mentioned above are legitimate, the root cause and motive that would lead to anyone to commit suicide after experiencing those inflictions is lack of faith, and negligence to seeking the meaning of life, and failure to connect with God. Anyone who suffers from any mental or physical illness, if he or she has strong faith and belief correctly, that person is less likely to give away his precious life."
That comment is religious in nature, and I'm not going to touch that.
Okay.
But what I wanted to add and to say to that is that consider that before we had religious belief systems, organized religious belief systems like Christianity or Islam or Judaism.
Right. So he went further to say, all right, so one person replied and said, "I get what you're saying, but when the greatest believer loses hope sometimes, the minute a believer might think their faith has failed them, that might be it." Thank you. That's Andre Maria Castello. That's why I made the comments and I mentioned the individual who has strong faith and belief correctly. I'll be honest to goodness with my explanation, and I hope it does not offend anyone, and hopefully we're all open-minded and straightforward here. Okay? I really want to read the whole thing. Yes, I will. So I made this diagram to try to set my point across in a simplified manner. And I'm Muslim. I see four types of people: the atheist, the agnostic, the follower of religion excluding Islam, and the believer. That's a Muslim. So when we compare all four regards to the total obsolete despair and dejection with life, that which would lead to committing suicide, you'll find that the majority of those who commit suicide are atheists, agnostics, and those who have total disbelief or any sort of religion. Following that are those who have belief in Christianity or other religion except Islam. And then you will find the lowest suicide rates are in the Middle East or Muslim countries. In addition, you will find that Muslims have the highest life satisfactory above any other religion. The key here is the true and correct connection with life and God. When you mention that individual that loses hope and thinks that their faith has failed them, then this is an affirmation that he might be following a false belief system. Because if you're a strong believer and you know for a fact that you follow the obsolete truth and you believe you're worshiping the true God and scripture, then how would you fail? How would your faith fail you? That wouldn't make sense. If someone reaches the point of knowing the actual truth of the meaning of life and worships God accordingly, the way he systematized and planned, it would be nearly impossible for that person to ever commit suicide, because the correct remembrance of God in return will satisfy his inner self and prevent him from killing himself. And suicide tolls down to pure emptiness or doubt. And that's what most disbelievers have: either emptiness of life and God, or severe doubt about his religion and belief. Someone at a point in his life was depressed. I used to be on medication, and it made it even worse for me. And the only thing that cured me was understanding God's true scripture, the Quran, he quotes, and worshiping, praying, connecting to God the correct way as he instructed me to. I'm someone who studied the Bible and the Quran and found the Quran to be the absolute word of God. And my life has never been been better after implementing what as a human was created for. Even when I go through the toughest stages and losses of my life, I'm still always grateful, thankful, and content. The Creator is the only one who would have the answer of life satisfaction of the creation, simply because he created them and knows that they function better than themselves. I hope you understand what I'm saying. And then he goes on to quote, hey, and do not despair the Allah's mercy. That's the Quran, chapter 12, verse 87. And then he quotes some more down here.
I'm sure your followers can read all of that without us having to read through all of that. My comment on that is pretty simple. That one should not discount the role that a person's religious belief plays in assisting them with their mental health. But one should not discount the role and the purpose and the function of adequate, competent mental health care to be able to get the kind of treatment and the kind of help that a person needs. But
it's like an illness. It's like an illness.
Well, mental health is there have been a couple of articles and research things that have pointed out that suggests that religious belief is almost a form of insanity. Okay? But putting that aside, what I would want to let us focus on is mental health. Because as I said, mental health existed long before many religions came to be. And I will suggest that religion has actually become another avenue to exacerbate mental health issues, but also at the same time assists some people with becoming calm, with getting some kind of relief in the absence of a mental health professional. But I'm not saying that one should discount mental health therapy for a religious belief, or one should turn to religious belief solely as the way to get answers and to get the healing that they need for their mental health. Okay? Hold on. So, if we're talking about mental health as an issue, and mental health, everybody wants to jump on suicide. Suicide, as I said, is an end result.
Yeah.
What are the things that take place before? So, last Saturday, I discussed about sexual orientation. I discussed about trauma. I discussed about intergenerational trauma. I discussed about maternal trauma. I discussed about stress, how stress contributes to anxiety, and anxiety, if left unaddressed, leads to depression. And depression, if left unaddressed, then can lead to suicide. Hear what I said? It can lead to suicide.
It steps to it. And it was very interesting that many people who commented, they mentioned depression. They mentioned so many things, and all of those things was secondary. They were still secondary to what the issue would be.
Yeah, but you have
and
to.
How do you recognize depression? How do you recognize loneliness? How do you recognize all of those issues?
Well,
how do you see somebody? Okay, so before we get to the end result, okay?
Yes, loneliness is just one aspect.
I mean, there are a number of them.
Yeah. Loneliness, and we're not going to be able to answer everybody's comments.
No.
Because we'll be here all night. But loneliness is just one. Loneliness is a social fabric, a social network connectivity issue. So if you have not learned social interaction skills from around your family, then you're going to have a problem with connecting and maintaining those relationships. And understand something. Humans are not created to be alone. We are social creatures. And interestingly enough, even though we like to claim our independence and our self, we cannot exist as independent as the self unless we are with others. Yeah. So our very existence depends on our relationship with others. Now, people who are experiencing loneliness or feel isolated or feel abandoned, they need to ask themselves and perhaps in consultation or in discussion with somebody professional. What are the things that are going on in their life that cause them to step away? People don't step away from you. You often will step away from people. And you, by stepping away, you then create this wall around you, this isolation. So then you start complaining and talking about how lonely you feel, how abandoned you feel, how nobody likes you, how nobody wants to be around you. But stop for a minute.
You're the one pulling away.
You may be the one who chose to pull away from people for whatever reason. So for example, someone who has been sexually abused, whether male or female, okay? And because of the sexual abuse, every time at a certain day or a certain smell or a certain color will trigger the memory. And they will be finding it difficult to enter into and connect with other people and have relationships with people. And so they say, well, you know what? I'd rather be alone. Or what about those people who may have been hurt in a relationship or may have had a bad experience with somebody? And what do? I don't trust anybody.
Yeah.
I pull away. I'm stay by myself because all of y'all are just a mess. So you are the one who pull away. But if you were to stop and ask yourself the question, what is it about me that caused me to pull away? What is it about me that prevents me from reaching out and accepting help from other people? Because others are noticing that you're pulling away, but they may be afraid to come and say, Vaughn, what's going on? Vaughn, I see you're not mixing with us anymore. Vaughn, we're not hearing from you.
No, they don't want to hear.
Vaughn, you're not coming around anymore. You're not hanging out with us anymore. What's going on? Because they're afraid that you're going to tell them mind your own business. Or they're afraid you're going to be like, shut them, push them and say, well, I don't want to talk about it. Okay? And the people who may be asking these questions may be just not necessarily wanting to help. So it means that now Vaughn will have to discern who are the people that's asking him what is going on. Can he then, based on previous experience with those people, can I talk to this person? Or can I say to this person, okay, this is what's going on. I need some help. Okay? But it's a two-way street kind of thing. Because the other person that you're going to reach out to and ask for help needs also to understand that what you're asking for help for is not something light. It's not something easy. And they also need to be honest with themselves and say, well, you know what, Vaughn? I may not be able to be the best person to help you, but I know somebody who can. So do you want me to connect you to somebody? Okay, now I'll put you in touch with somebody.
Yeah.
Or the person that Vaughn might reach out and say, you know something, I need you to help me, and I really don't know how much more I can continue. I don't know how much more I can take of this. Okay? And when you tell that person your story, that person may be reluctant to help you because you telling them your story bring up memories of their own story that they had never resolved, that they had never addressed, that was always they just keep pushing it down. And the fact that you mention it bring all of their drama back up, and they'll be like, oh no, I can't. Vaughn, they didn't return your phone call anymore. Okay? And some people may not even reach out because they may suspect that Vaughn is dealing with something that Vaughn, I don't know how to deal with this if Vaughn were to tell me. Because I got my own shit going on. Mm-hmm. And it comes back again to we're completing the circle.
Then again, my philosophy is, if I know you cannot in a position to help me, you don't need to know my problems.
That is false. Because you don't know who I may know. You don't know who I may know. But if I am honest with you, I'll say to you, Vaughn, I may not be able to help you with your problem now, but I can put you in touch with someone. Okay? Do you mind if I help you? Okay? And I need to be able to reassure you that what you say is between you and me. That I'm not going to go repeat this to anyone else.
You know our
I understand.
culture. You know the culture.
Yes, because we like to talk, we like to gossip and talk
They can't hold a shit. They can't hold nothing.
No. And there's a reason why we gossip and talk name. To make ourselves seem more important than we really are. We often gossip. Gossiping is a form of news. It's a form of telling and passing on information. In every bit of gossip, there is a bit of truth. Mm-hmm. Okay? Like in every rumor, there is always a bit of truth.
Yeah.
Rumors is a way of spreading news. Gossip is a way of spreading news too. But watch this. If the person who is spreading the gossip wants to talk about you, then the question is, what does it reveal about them that they will then talk about somebody else? So, for example, how many of us will listen to other people talk about other people? And do we ever wonder, what will they say about me? You understand what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Okay. So, just moving on a little bit, because a lot of this is complex and we can go off in many different directions.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah. I really want to focus on the signs and the symptoms for people to look
Well,
for.
we got so far off there, it's not even funny.
Yeah.
So I want us to, let's first of all talk about
detecting the signs.
Well, before we start detecting
I'm
signs.
thirsty. I need a drink.
Well, hang on. Before we start detecting signs, we talked earlier about trauma. Okay?
Childhood trauma.
Well, no, even before childhood trauma. Let's talk about intergenerational trauma. The trauma that we inherited from our grandparents or great-grandparents. And let's ask the question, how many of us know our family stories? How many of us know of our great-great-uncle? How many of us know about the cousin who killed himself? Or the cousin who was lynched? Or the cousin
They don't want
who
you
was
talking
hanged?
about that stuff. They don't want you talking about that stuff.
Exactly.
No.
Because those are the stories that tell you about some of the traumas that have been passed on. So let's go back to the days of slavery. The whole separation from the African continent and being brought to the Caribbean or the United States. Separation was a key and was one of the most traumatic things for black people. And still is today. So, let's take, for example, in 2015, the British government made the final installment on the payment of the loan that they obtained from the Rothschild Bank in 1834 to pay the plantation owners in the Caribbean and Guyana for the abolition of slavery. Because the plantation owners claimed that if the slaves are freed, then we will lose labor to reap the sugar cane. So as of February 2015, black people, as far as the British government was concerned, were still property. Okay? In the United States today, the discrepancy between laws and the judicial system, how police interact with black people, how institutions treat black people and people of color, still black people are considered property, not humans. They are still not seen as humans. Consequently, why I said earlier that both mental health care and including HIV treatment were never designed for black people, because black people consistently have not been seen as human. We've always consistently been seen as property, as less than. Okay? Now, let's talk about that trauma that comes from our great-great-great-grandparents. Let's talk about the stories that we carry in us. That, sometimes you go somewhere, or you smell something, or you hear somebody say something, and
it takes you back.
And you think, why does it feel like I've been here before? It is likely because the memory that your ancestors had The experience that your ancestors had is imprinted in your cell structure that was passed on from generation to generation, so that today, when you experience that, it's like a deja vu moment. It's like, oh shucks, why does it feel like I've been here before? Well, you may not in your entire life have been there before. But your grandparents may have been, or your great-great-grandparents, or some descendant, some ancestor way back might have been there, or might have had that experience that triggered that memory. So you've got the intergenerational trauma that you're carrying with you. But then you also have what is called a contemporaneous trauma. The trauma that even childbirth is traumatic for both the child and the mother. Okay? So you've got the trauma of contemporaneous trauma, growing up, being teased, being whipped, being bullied, okay, being picked on, being called names, okay? And all of that is adding up and building, accumulating in you. Now, all of these traumas, what sometimes we may call microaggressions, okay, when you get passed over for promotion at your job, because the white person who is less qualified than you gets promoted and becomes your boss. Well, now you're reporting to a white person who you now have to teach and tell them their job because you're the one who know it, but you get passed over. Okay? Or you go out for lunch and you come back 5 minutes late. Why are you 5 minutes late from lunch? Okay? We're gonna take these 5 minutes away from you. Okay, so we'll dock your pay for 5 minutes. Okay? Or your work is never really quite good as the white person's work. So we judge because of that. So these little microaggressions, they build up and they add up. But as these microaggressions come in, every time something like that happens, it causes you to feel stress. And every time you feel stress, your body, your brain releases cortisol. And cortisol floods the bloodstream, causes a flight or fight response. And you either find a way to mitigate the flight or fight. You either stay and fight or you run like hell. Now, you choose which one you want to do. And in the process, you try to mitigate, to relieve the stress. But the stress doesn't quite go away. It also keeps building because the cortisol contributes to significant changes in the brain structure. And that stress, the flooding, the cortisol in the brain begins very early in life. So children who are exposed to significant amounts of stress and trauma, cortisol floods their brain and transforms significant sections of their brain that affects their ability to learn and affects their concentration. That as they grow older, that then contributes to their being able to function properly in society. Okay? Now, you've been dealing with all this stress building one on top of the other over time. You're not able to process it. What does the stress end up doing? You find all sorts of means to cope with the stress. Okay?
Temporary fixes.
You might do some drugs to take the edge off. You might be drinking. You might be screwing around as much as anything that walks. Okay? As a way to cope with the stress. Some people have healthy ways of coping with stress. Listening to music.
Singing a karaoke tune every night.
Okay. Or cooking.
Yeah.
Okay? Or exercising.
Yeah.
Or working out.
Yeah.
Or going
you have to find what works for you.
Yes. And so over time, many people have learned there are different ways to cope and help relieve their stress. Okay? And understanding also that getting sleep, getting at least more than 4 hours sleep a night is important, not just for your stress levels, but for your overall mental health. Because if you don't have enough sleep, then there is the neurochemicals in your brain that allow for thinking and processing and emotions and stuff get thrown out of whack. Okay? You see what happens when you go with at least one night without sleep? What happens to you? You think you're functioning, but you're really not, because your brain now starts to turn on itself. Okay? All right. So we've got all this trauma going on.
We're an hour in.
Okay, well we have to wrap up soon.
Yeah, so let's do it in 30 minutes.
So a number of factors contribute to stress. Okay? So we ask ourselves the question, how does it affect us and lead to depression?
Put your phone far.
Okay, so when stress isn't managed or reduced or resolved, anxiety develops. And when anxiety remains unmanaged or resolved, then depression happens. And so one of the questions I want to ask you who are listening and watching this is thinking about your mental health, which includes stress, depressions, and problems with your emotions. How many days during the last 30 days would you say your mental health was not good? Are you coping? If not, have you ever had a stress test, a mental stress test, not a cardiac stress test, a mental stress test? So let's talk about depression and anxiety, depression, and suicide. Okay? Previous studies suggest that a child whose sexual orientation or gender identity or expression was accepted by one or both parents was more likely to grow up as a well-adjusted member of the community or the society. More likely to consider, plan for, and attempt suicide than their non-LGBTQ peers. But LGBTQ people of color